I believe so. We're waiting on our final trustee. However, he can join us. It is 5 o'clock.
Okay.
He just arrived. Just one moment.
Thank you. Okay. Oops. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, good evening. I would like to call this meeting to order. The time is 5 p.m. Welcome to a special meeting of the Board of Trustees of the St. Helena Unified School District. Today is Wednesday. Actually, today is not Wednesday. Today is Friday, October 16, 2020. I am Lisa Pelosi, Board Vice President. I would like to introduce my fellow trustees through roll call. When you hear your name, please respond with here. Joe Brody?
Here.
Jeff Conwell?
Here.
Jeannie Kerr?
Here.
Julio Ogeen?
Here.
Maria Haug?
Here.
I would also like to introduce our district staff attending in person. Superintendent Dr. Mary Lou Wilson.
Good evening.
Chief Academic Human Resources Officer, Mr. Chris Heller.
Good evening.
Chief Business Official, Mrs. Andy Stubbs.
Good evening.
Executive Assistant to the Superintendent and Governing Board, Miss Erica Madrigal.
Hello.
Our IT Systems Analyst, Mr. Derek Machado. We are delighted that you are joining us on Zoom, television channel 27, or our YouTube channel. A copy of this board meeting video will also be available on our website at www.stHelenaunified.org. I would also at this time like to introduce our translator this evening, Isidra.
Sí. Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Bienvenidos a la reunión del Distrito Escolar Unificado de Santa Elena. Esta es una reunión de la Junta. En la tarde de la reunión de hoy también se puede ver a través del canal de televisión 27 o de YouTube. Ustedes, si necesitan servicios de interpretación en español, pueden acceder a los servicios apretando el icono que tienen al fondo de su pantalla a la derecha, que es una redonda como si fuera un globo del mundo. Una vez le hagan clic a esa imagen, se va a abrir un menú que va a poner English or Spanish. Pueden hacer presión en Spanish y de esa manera van a pasar al canal de interpretación en español. Gracias.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda for this meeting. Can I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Trustee Brody?
Aye.
Trustee Conwell?
Aye.
Trustee Kerr?
Aye.
Trustee Olguin?
Aye.
Trustee Haug? Trustee Haug?
Aye.
Trustee Pelosi?
Aye. Motion carries. We'd now like to ask everybody to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, moving on to item 4A of the agenda. This is the St. Helena Unified School District reopening update and discussion. And I'd like to call on Dr. Mary Lou Wilson, please.
Thank you, Vice President Pelosi. And before I get started, I do want to introduce the other people on the screen that are with us this evening. A huge thank you to Mary Allen, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, that is with us.
Good evening.
Thank you. Our principal at the primary school, Tamara Sanguinetti.
Good evening.
The elementary school, Tanya Pearson.
Good evening.
Middle school, RLS, Corinne Cox.
Good evening.
And our high school, Mr. Ben Cinto.
Howdy.
And thank you also for being with us this evening, Brandon Farrell, our Teachers Union President.
Good evening.
All right. I'm hearing some echo, so just one moment, please. As we move forward, I am going to share my screen and I have a presentation. And I just wanted to warn all of you that we have a presentation, which is a slide deck, and then there are also some additional documents that I want to share with you. So I will be toggling in between the two, and I will beg your forgiveness at this time if it feels a little clunky at times. So we are here to talk about the reopening of schools, and we will begin, as we have for the last number of months, with a few updates for you with regards to the county. With regards to the glass fire incident, all of you are aware that the community of St. Helena was impacted by fire loss, evacuations, and really, really poor air quality. We do still have some of our employees and community members who are either fully in mandatory evacuation or back at their homes without power. There's still homes with no power in place. We did have 35 families that lost their homes. We have homes and businesses that are damaged in the St. Helena greater community, and we had one employee lose their home. If any of our members of the audience are watching, there is so much information around fire loss on the Napa County website. I urge all of you to go to that website to learn more about all of the stages of rebuilding and recuperation that there are. It is very complex. With regards to the Napa County Public Health, you've seen this screen before. On the left-hand side, the important numbers to look at are at the lower part. The 7-day average for the Napa County is 1.6%. That's the percent positivity rate. That's a really important number. It's been going down and down and down, and we're really excited about that percent positivity. The health equity testing positivity is a new metric that was put in a couple of weeks ago, and it looks at equity with regards to the number of people testing based on race in the community, and the number is 2.1% in our community. When you look at that dashboard, the important piece to note is that every one of every one of the dials is in the green zone, meaning that we are in the best place we can be as a county with regards to the virus and the contagion of the virus. In addition, reported just yesterday, and many of you I'm sure received this information via an email or Nixle, we are reported to potentially move from the red tier into the orange tier as quickly as Wednesday, October 21st. That's because we've had this consistent level of low positivity rate in the county, along with high numbers of people being tested. In order for us to move into that orange tier, we need to meet that low criteria for 2 consecutive weeks. So we've gone into that criteria 1 week, and as quickly as next Wednesday, we could be in that orange tier. That orange tier is important for our community. It will allow for much more flexibility for our businesses and our industries, and the guidance can be found again on the Napa County website. I put a quote there from Dr. Karen Reluccio. I've been working so closely with her since February of this year, and this was part of the email that came out to everyone, yesterday, talking about the importance of the diligence in helping to fight the pandemic. People are watching their distance, they are wearing masks, and they are washing their hands. And all of those strategies are critically important as we continue to move forward. I'm going to ask Andy Stubbs to turn on her microphone now and talk about some safety protocols as we continue looking forward into reopening our schools.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Here we see some examples of some of the personal protective equipment that we've ordered, and the requirement is to have a minimum of at least 3 months supply of all personal protective equipment, cleaning and sanitizing supplies as outlined in the guidelines provided by the Napa County Office of Education. And so we verify that we have at least that amount for everything, if not more, in stock for several items. And we are already monitoring stock and then preparing additional orders. And we've been establishing some shared supply lists at the school site so the teachers and other staff can request what they need well in advance of when we run out. Advance the slide, please. And we've developed some health and safety checklists to use that are aligned with the guidelines that I referenced. And we're planning to use those lists during special site validation meetings with each principal to ensure the facilities are ready to go before students return. And this slide shows just a few of the things that we will be looking at during those validation meetings. And next slide. Before we conduct those final site walkthroughs, however, we're going to be reviewing custodial cleaning schedules in particular to make sure that they're aligned with instructional schedules and that there is enough time to complete cleaning protocols based on the guidelines. For example, our custodians are going to be disinfecting the bathrooms 3 times a day. We will also be adding some temporary custodial support to make sure that we can complete all of the extra cleaning, disinfecting, and restocking while still attending to regular work. And our custodians have participated in specialized training, and we're preparing some guidelines for other staff that show how they can support with cleaning in the classroom. And so with that, I would turn that over to Mary.
Good evening, everyone. As Andy reiterated, we have plenty of stuff related to PPEs and our equipment, and also the handling of our facilities during in-person instruction. My charge was working with a committee of our school nurse as well as several of our administrators to create the health protocols by looking at CDC guidelines, looking at California public health guidelines, and looking at Napa County public health guidelines. With that, we have protocols that we've set up for students, for parents and guardians, as well as teachers. As you all know, this is not a one-person job. This is going to take the community to help us out with having kids come back to school. We are relying definitely on the students, and we're relying on the parents and the guardians in the community, as well as our teaching staff and our staff in general, to make this happen and to be successful. Because the ultimate goal is we want every student to come back to school. With that, I'm going to cover the health protocols. So as I just stated, we've prepared the student, parent, and staff healthy protocols. Erica, do you mind going back to that, please? Thank you, Mary Lou. I'm sorry. I'm working off of the slide deck there. With this, we're looking at the parent screener that will be asked of parents to sign. So the parent and guardian will have a health screener. We're expecting parents to go ahead and make sure they do this screening every day. If your child is sick, we absolutely want you to keep them home. We're not looking to penalize any student for staying home. This is all about safety this year, folks. And if students are not feeling well, we absolutely want you to keep them home. And so parents will be expected to make sure that they do the health screening every day, and this includes a temperature check, and to sign off that they're going to do that. And then you'll see on the bottom right here, you'll see the symptoms of COVID-19 and what to look for. And this is what we're expecting from the community in reference to the parents and the guardians. If you can go to the student, what we're expecting of the students as we are working through the protocols, we have many protocols, and what you're seeing is just the face sheet of the agreement for the parents and guardian and the student oath and pledge that we're expecting of our students. We will expect our students, all students, to have a mask when they come to school at all times. And we're looking for appropriate masks, which that will be stated with our package that goes out to parents as well as the principal review. They will be providing a parent training on all the protocols in reference to what we're looking for. But when I'm looking at this for the student oath, you will distance, you'll have a mask on, you will sanitize, wash or sanitize your hands often, going into class, coming out of class, and you're going to follow what we're expecting and hoping that every single student will follow the safety protocols that we have in place and the principals will be going over the day in the life of a student when they get to school. And there'll be some student training as well as parent training in reference to our safety protocols. Also, we have public service announcements that our nurse has worked with some of our students on that will be pushed out to students in reference to wearing a mask, physically distancing, as well as what's an appropriate way to wear a mask, and how to wash your hands and sanitize your hands. So we are going to have staff training within the next week. We will have a general staff training for all staff at one time, so they're hearing the message, and then we will have site-specific training, and this will be conducted by our school nurse, so we can answer questions for any of our staff. The principals will be conducting a parent information presentation to answer questions on what will school look like, and also the parent and student responsibility. And on first day of school, we will be doing a lot of student training, as certainly at the lower grades, there'll be a lot of modeling and walking it through. And then we have comprehensive staff resources that are available and in a Google Doc that have been sent out to everybody. We have really focused on the health protocols because our guys is to get the students back in school as soon as possible and as safe as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Brandon, would you like to say a few words on behalf of the Teachers Union?
Sure. Good evening. SHGA would like to thank the board for being allowed to participate in tonight's meeting. A few weeks ago, our progress towards reopening schools on October 26th was in full swing. Our teachers were coming in to prepare their classrooms. Meetings were being scheduled and held to better understand the protocols and to ask questions. Teachers were also, by and large, thinking about ways that they could transition to executing in-person learning in a much different environment than what we're used to. Fast forward ahead, we feel there are still many, many hurdles to overcome. We met last week as a board and wrote a letter that we felt best suited all of our members going forward. We wanted to make sure none of our student population were being left behind. We wanted to make sure the safe return to school had proper vetting opportunities. And we wanted to make sure our students received the best and most consistent education possible. In the last 8 days, progress to these goals has definitely been made or have been planned. Many ideas in this presentation support or begin to support our ideals for stating our position last week. However, there is still a lot that has to be sorted out. SHGA feels it should be afforded every opportunity to work safely in our classrooms. That includes proper vetting, proper training, and clear and communicatable goals, or protocols, SHGA also feels we should be able to teach professionally without our roles being diminished or asked to perform multiple roles at the same time. We believe that once this can happen, we certainly can effectively teach in the classroom with students. I'd also like to take this time to be very, very clear. SHGA has never, ever said that we do not want to work in person. SHGA has never, ever said that we don't want to work. And SHGA has never, ever said that we don't appreciate the district's efforts to create a safe environment to work in. I also would like to take this quick opportunity to address some of my vulnerable members. I would be remiss if I didn't advocate to the board for my members that feel vulnerable and feel like their safety could be compromised. Some of these members are more experienced, and some just have family members that they want to take care of. Whatever we do, there is always going to be a risk, but ignoring these members is something I won't do. Even in the smallest of class sizes, that adult teacher is going to be confined in a room with multiple children in an enclosed environment for several hours. I've never read a single CDC guideline that recommends to do that exact thing without absolute caution and the best protection. If this were the case, we'd all find ourselves in a lot less Zoom calls or a lot fewer Zoom calls. We may even find ourselves in a live in-person board meeting. Again, I want to thank you for the opportunity and to be included in this meeting. And I'm going to stay on this time for the entire, in case you have any questions at the end.
Thank you, Brandon. Now we'll move to Mr. Heller, who will provide us with some instruction updates.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Good evening, everyone. Slide 11 here on instruction shows, at our last governing board meeting, we deliberated the need to support families who chose not to return in person when we were in a position to reopen our classrooms. And I think it's really important to recognize prior to March of 2020, the district administration and our staff had very little experience in the realm of distance learning. Zoom, Google Hangout, any of those things were very foreign to us and may be used on a very small scale. But teaching online is fundamentally different than being in front of students. And so what I'm saying in short is that the logistics surrounding distance learning has actually been a learning experience for all of us. Keeping this in mind, our district, as well as many others, did not have a distance learning program as a backup to enroll students in immediately or efficiently. That just wasn't something that many districts had in place. So I think this background information is critical as we determine how many families would choose to remain in distance learning regardless of what the program was or is. Our next steps may have looked very different tonight if our responses showed that 75% of our families wanted distance learning as an example. We would be talking about a different recommendation potentially. So the re-enrollment form provided the data that you see here, 1,187 responses. 76% of those responses from our families request in-person learning, and 24% request distance learning. And the site, broken down by data, helps our staff discuss and design the instruction now that will meet the needs of all of our students. In slide 12, we look at the primary and elementary school programs. Based on our numbers received, we've determined that both in-person and distance learning can be accommodated by our SHUSD staff. That is, our teachers can teach all of our students in the TK5 program. However, to accomplish this task, we may need to reassign teachers to distance learning, which may lead to a few reassignments of students to other teachers. In addition to balanced classes and class size and recognizing that constraint that might exist, we may explore combination classes at some grade levels to meet this goal. That is, we may have a TK and K class, a K1 class, or a grades 1 and 2 class. We may. And so as an additional option for our families, those still enrolled in Fuel Education as a distance learning program, or those that wish to be enrolled in that program, those families and students would be accommodated. In slide 13, we take a look at the middle and high school options. At this level, we're going to continue with our current schedules, and we really anticipate only a few minor schedule changes, mostly based on how our in-person days look with staffing, but there shouldn't be a huge impact at these two grade levels. Those that select distance learning would be provided by enrolling students in our district used and approved program called Apex Independent Study. And those students would be under the supervision of a SHUSD staff member. So all of our distance learning would be housed under our staff to make sure that our students are being monitored by our staff members. In slide 14, as we think about what school may look like when we reopen, it's really important for all of us to note that it's going to look vastly different than it did last February when we were prior to the COVID outbreak. The way our classrooms and our school sites are going to be conducted, and our classrooms in particular, it's going to look very, very different. And I'd also like to state that the schedules online that reflect the in-person learning model, those were developed and negotiated last July. And so as we start to look at what our models look like, those are going to be revised in the next week or so. So if you go to that website tonight and take a look at the in-person schedule, that's potentially going to look a little different by each site in the next week or so. So we will alert the community through the school site when those schedules are ready to view. But what I think was important, and we're going to have our principals speak here in just a second, is we felt it would be important for each principal to outline what a school day looks like for their students at their sites. And so we're going to take a little opportunity here to have our principals inform the community. And we're going to start with the high school principal, Ben Cinto. So Ben, would you take the honor?
Good evening. I'm just going to give you some highlights. I didn't want to read it because it's all right in front of you, but I want to talk about first how we arrived at our, are you pulling that up, Erica? But how we arrived at our day in the life. At first, it was just myself and Mr. Fetter sitting down and thinking about what would a day look like from arrival to leaving. And then knowing that that was definitely not going to be good enough, we had it vetted by a single teacher before we brought it to our entire staff. And that process proved very fruitful, asked some very pragmatic and practical questions, because the whole thing is built on the notion of what is most practicable. After we had the entire staff vet it, and that's kind of the green section you see in some of those areas, you know, upon our return to in-person learning, our students are going to vet it, and they're going to vet it by practicing it. And we're going to find out what works and what doesn't work. And from there, we'll be able, I know it probably reads really restrictive right now, but we'll be able to identify what we can take away and what we might need to add on through practice. We know it's not going to be perfect, but we think this is kind of our best attempt at the start. The entire thing, and I was able to meet with student leadership the other day, and I'm glad Joe is here because he's part of that class, but the entire document is also built on the notion, and Mary touched on this a little, is that this whole experience is going to be a partnership, and that between parents and students and staff members, our success or failure is going to be dependent upon everybody jumping in and doing their darndest to make this happen. And I'm really confident in that. You know, having worked at the high school for now my 14th year, we are situated from a staffing lens, student lens, and a parent lens. I mean, we're situated well. So I anticipate great success with our day in the life protocols. Lastly, we don't want to wait till students show up to start practicing. So we're actually going to be creating a video of every instance of a day in the life that we'll be able to share with students and families prior to the return to in-person learning. So again, it's pretty detailed, but again, it's going to be a living document beyond today that will improve over time. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, go ahead. Dr. Wilson, you can facilitate that.
Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, go ahead.
Yay, Zoom. I'm Corinne Cox, the principal of RLS. Mr. Cinto and I have worked really closely together during this entire process. As the two secondary principals, our schedules are the most similar, and our challenges also are the most similar. So in looking at this list, it's somewhat like the high schools in many ways, because for a lot of our challenges involve students going from class to class and how all that looks. There are some things that might be slightly different at RLS. Our schedules might end up being very slightly different, but for the most part, we're keeping it more or less similar. So those of you who have children at both sites, you'll find it not that different at the high school than at RLS. We also tried to look at the things that we thought would cause the most issues. And as Mr. Cinto said, I just want to reiterate that when we actually encounter these situations in real life, this is again a living document, and some things may change. This is our best guess based on our knowledge of students and our staff and our campus about what might end up being a challenge and how we can best address that. But all of our best guesses are not going to manage to predetermine every single thing that might happen. And so a few things, as he said, might become more restrictive. Some things might become less restrictive. Our focus at all times is keeping students safe, keeping staff safe, making sure that everyone follows the protocol. And again, that is a partnership. We have older students, and we really rely on our older students to be more responsible for themselves than a 5-year-old would be. So when students are in middle school or high school, we need them to be a part of making this successful so that everyone can come back to school and be safe.
Thank you, Corinne. Ms. Pearson?
Thank you. For the elementary school, and like Ms. Cox and Mr. Cento, we also will have that pre-opening training with some videos and especially highlighting the points of habit that will need to change in order to do two things. Mainly is to limit the spacing and make sure that we're coming in with flow that is safe, and that we're also being careful about high touch or high, I'll say, changing space and stuff. So how we're navigating our campus and how we're also sharing some of our common areas. Fortunately, we're positioned really well. We don't actually have a parking lot and whatnot, so there's not like a really strict habit of where people have access to school generally. We come from many areas, but now we will be actually having a few things in the morning. The 3rd grade will enter through Adams Street, 4th grade on Oak Avenue, and 5th grade on Tainter. A few really positive things about our plan is that most classrooms, 11 of them, have very open outdoor entrances to them that are quite far away from the other classrooms. 4 of the classrooms that are inside the main building, we share 3 different rooms or different doors to get into them. So we'll have clear pathways for certain folks to go in, depending on the classroom, to make sure that we're minimizing the crossing of patterns of where people are walking in. Stickers on the floor, a bunch of those other things, that will all be in the more minutia that we'll talk about in the video and in the parent education. But again, we also are working on building those habits and making sure that kids and staff understand the routines that we are implementing from day one. So how they're getting into school, temperature checks, wearing masks, and then how we do things like going to bathrooms, eating snacks, we'll be doing outside, spaced at a distance, and just managing our flow during our break time. Inside our classrooms, we are very fortunate to have quite large rooms, and we're able to space with proper, barriers when we need them with plexiglass and a few other things that we'll definitely reinforce when we talk to you all about further education pieces. So again, really looking forward to developing the proper habits based on what we think is going to help us minimize our contact and keep kids safe and staff as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Pearson. Mrs. Sanguinetti?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I don't want to do like a challenge off, but we really do have a big challenge at the primary school. We have kids that have never been on our campus before, and we have kids that love to hug and really aren't clear on boundaries. So we know we have a lot of work to do, but we have done the work. One of the things, we do have drop off, and so we have designated, which will come out later, areas in which grade levels will be dropping off their kids. We have spoken to Officer Wilson, not Officer Wilson, Officer Brown, about our drop off points. And so we have first grade will be dropped off in the front of the school. They'll be dropped off in the back of the school, and second grade will be dropped off on the street on train. And so we've also created placards that each parent is going to have. So we don't have to yell out who's your child, who's their teacher. We'll just have parents will hold up like the placard that says Corinne Cox, Mrs. Chia. And so we'll quickly be able to identify parents and be able to get their kids safely to them. One of the things we already have individual desks set up, and we probably have about at least 50% of the desk shields already on the desks. We have the same thing that everyone else has. I think one of the questions probably is we are going to have recess, and each classroom will have their own set of recess equipment, and we've divided our playground into 5 different zones. And so every day a class will have a different zone to be able to play in. And probably the last thing that I'll follow up with is that kids get really hungry, and that's 1 o'clock is a long time for kids to wait to eat. So we are going to have certainly students can bring their own snack, but food service is also providing snacks that will be delivered to classrooms, and kids will eat in the classroom. Some will eat outside, some will eat in the classroom. And the same thing with lunch. Although it says lunch will be grab and go, we've really talked a lot about that, and that's a long time, 1 o'clock for kids to eat. So we will probably have something what we're calling a working lunch for our students, so they can fill up their fuel tank. I think that's pretty much everyone, the temperature thing that people are following. We have this, we're working on having the stickers on the ground. Our bathrooms are going to be cleaned at the same time, but during recess, all the bathrooms will be cleaned in between each recess. So anyway, that's my presentation.
Thank you, Mrs. Sanguinetti.
Mary Lou, this is Mary. I just think it's important to state that TK5, they're in cohorts. They will not be mingling with other cohorts. They'll be staying with the same group of students all day.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mary. Mr. Heller?
Yes, thank you. Slide 15, in reopening our classrooms, we shared with the board and the community at our last meeting the possibility of using the hybrid model for a reduced student population for 1 to 3 weeks to transition back into in-person instruction. But based on the data from the survey and our current revised Napa County Public Health Guidelines, we're comfortable with opening our classroom in the full 5 days on day one in that in-person model. And then based on all the information that we've provided tonight and these recommendations, we're also aware that some families may listen to this presentation tonight and change their minds and want to return to in-person instruction. And so if you're interested in that option, we urge you to contact your site administrator as soon as possible to inquire about site availability or space availability by site. As I mentioned, some of these classes are capped already with the enrollment that we have with space considerations for in-person instruction, but there are grade levels and there are certain classes where there are still some spots available for in-person instruction. So potentially principals could be working on new schedules starting as early as Monday. So if you are interested in that option, I would advise you to contact your principal directly. And so that concludes my instruction portion of this presentation.
And Mr. Heller, just to clarify as well, if someone has identified that they are interested in in-person and based on outcomes tonight from our governing board, potentially if they wanted to change their mind, they could also contact their principal and make that change as well to distance learning?
In the inverse, correct, yes.
Okay.
They could go either way.
All right, thank you. So board members, last week when I brought up the idea of potentially looking at a different start date because of our closure for 2 weeks, I talked with you about a number of next steps that needed to occur. This is complex, and while what we presented to you tonight seems, is the very a concise version of the work that's been occurring since really in March and more specifically since August. The transition team and all of our employees have been working diligently. So our next steps, we do need to communicate with our community, our in-person dates. We do have enrollment packets that will be required that will need to be sent in the mail and collected either in hard copy or electronically. Those enrollment packets will include the parent compact around the health guidelines and safety protocols, the pledge that the children are making, the oath that they're making, transportation information, lots of different aspects. And that packet must be returned to us before we start school. As Mary mentioned earlier, each of our principals have some more work to do with regards to parent information. And Andy Stubbs is continuing to finalize transportation applications and routes. We have the buses, we have the routes, we have the drivers. We just need to get all of that finalized once we receive that paperwork from our families. We also, now that we have the numbers with regards to distance and in-person, we need to finalize the teacher and student assignments and those schedules, as Mr. Heller mentioned earlier, that may be modified ever so slightly. We are really close to finalizing the staff testing protocols. You'll recall last week that I mentioned that Napa County Public Health is working with us to provide free testing for our employees. And we will be offering that to all of our employees once every 2 months. They can be tested more frequently if they like. We will be offering and arranging that for them at the minimum of once every 2 months. Our food services team has been working diligently since March 16th. They have not stopped preparing food for our families, and they are an incredible group of people. And Angela Baxter, our director of food services, in a heartbeat will be able to finalize those food service models so that she can continue to feed those families who are in a distance model and anyone else who might be in the community that needs food that is under the age of 18, and then also food services for every one of our school sites, as the principals mentioned in the day in the life for the students. We, Andy Stubbs mentioned that we'll be doing site validation walks. Executive Cabinet will be walking each site with the principals, and we have a very detailed checklist that we need to look at and ensure that are the signs available? Are the wash stations where they need to be? Are the barriers where they are supposed to be? Are the desks in the right place? So those validation walks need to occur in the next couple of weeks. And then Mary mentioned all of the staff training that still needs to occur, and also our parent training. And so we do have a little bit more work to do. We've talked about the complexity of all of this. These are a few of the next steps that we need to take to be prepared for our students to come to us in person. And that does take us to the staff recommendation. And that clearly is to begin a 5-day in-person instruction and continue with distance learning for the selected families beginning on Monday, November 2nd. That is 1 week later than the October 26th date that we had originally were planning for. And with the 2 weeks of closure, I do believe that we can be ready on November 2nd. I do want to summarize a few pieces of this presentation as you're considering this recommendation. In our TK5 grades, I do want to remind you that the distance learning and in-person learning will be taught by district staff. It could potentially involve some teacher reassignments. It could result in some combination classes. And for families who are not interested in our staff providing a distance option, field education is still offered for our TK5. With regards to 612, the in-person instruction will occur with minimal teacher changes. The distance learning will be conducted via independent study, and that's our APEX learning program. And APEX learning will be monitored by our staff. So students will be monitored and working with our teachers in the APEX model. At this time, board members, we are available to discuss any aspect of this and answer any of your questions. And we thank you for your support in allowing us a little bit of extra time from last Thursday to bring this special meeting to you tonight.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson and Mr. Heller and Mrs. Stubbs and Ms. Allen. Thank you so much for all that information. We're going to move on to public comment at this time. Ms. Madrigal, are you able to pull up on your screen there for our viewers to see the policy regarding that, please? Thank you. You can read along, but I'm going to read a few things regarding public comment for tonight's meeting. Members of the public are entitled to speak on any item on the agenda, either immediately after the item is called by the board vice president or during a public hearing on the subject matter opened by the board vice president. You are requested to state your name and keep your comments concise, brief, and limited to 3 minutes. I would also like to remind those participating in public comment that you are expected to be respectful and mindful in your comments this evening. The board will not tolerate inflammatory, bullying, or attacking comments. I would also like to remind our viewers that 1, the board cannot answer questions or provide feedback to public comment, and 2, each person is entitled to speak on any agenda item only once at any meeting. All written public comments submitted have been reviewed by the trustees and are attached to the board agenda for review by members of the public as well. Ms. Madrigal, were there any public comments on this agenda item?
I would like to invite members of the public at this time that are in the audience to please raise your hand. That is at the bottom of your screen. There is a virtual hand. You may go ahead and click that. If you are participating on the telephone, please enter #9 now to be acknowledged for public comment. Vice President Pelosi, I have at this time 5 members of the public who would like to provide public comment.
Okay. Then I think that we can proceed with our standard time limit of 3 minutes per individual and continue from there.
Thank you. I would like to open public comment to Tish W. Please unmute your mic.
Good evening, St. Helena School Board members. Can you hear me? First of all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Good evening, school board members, including Joe Brody, Dr. Wilson, district administrators, principals, Representative Farrell, and everyone viewing. In order to streamline public comment, I am speaking for 17 families, which I will name at the end of the comment so that you have they are legitimate. We agree with the staff recommendation of starting school for those who would like to begin on November 2nd, 2020. We appreciate that the school district is taking all the COVID-19 precautions and that teachers that are at high risk are making personal decisions for their own health and safety. We as parents and families agree that we will work as partners with the district to ensure that our children are not sent to school if they are showing any signs of illness or have been exposed to those that have tested positive for COVID. We respect every family's and teacher's personal decisions regarding what is best for them personally. Here's a list of names of the families that agree with this recommendation: Wagner, Duran Brody, Sullivan, Reedy Raymond, Brisbalinski, Milliken, Brakesman, Novak, Rayner, Oliver, Williams, Harvey, Pistone, Ellis, White, Pryor Blum, and Earls. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Grace, staff, please unmute your mic.
Hello?
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I'm logged in. My name is Amy Denney Zuniga.
Yes.
Been under my work name. So my family has hesitantly signed up to send our 3 children who are at the primary, elementary, and middle school back, but we are fully in support of the Teachers Association's proposal to do so in January for several reasons. Number one is that the fires have already caused major disruption and dislocation, as we know, in the lives of all our families. Number two is that returning and readjusting to in-person learning with COVID modifications will be another major adjustment and disruption. Number three is that the 6 weeks from early November to December is full of holiday breaks from school, causing more disruption and possibly infections resulting from travel. Number four is that the high likelihood of infection during this time period would cause a minimum of 2 weeks of school closures, disruption, and major discouragement to the teachers, staff, and students who will have worked so hard to prepare for and adjust to in-person school in the midst of the uncertainty of fire season. I've also done the numbers according to the California Department of Public Health reopening guidance that was published on July 17th. And at least for elementary school and the primary school, the numbers just don't work out. If we have 12 classes of 15 students each returning to in-person learning at each of these schools, one case would close the classroom because it's more than 5% of the classroom, and one classroom would close the school because it's more than 5% of the school, and one school would close the district because it's 25% of the district. So the entire district then, according to the state guidance, has to remain COVID-free in order to remain open for in-person learning. If we do not plan to follow the state guidance, my question is, what are the thresholds that the board will be setting to be used for classroom, school, and district closures in the event that we have COVID cases? I understand a majority of our families want to return to in-person learning, but I'm wondering how many families are doing so, as mine is, reluctantly and primarily so our children can stay with our teachers. Could the school sites be turned into extensions of the Boys and Girls Club so that families who need relief could send their kids there to do distance learning? Returning to in-person learning in January, danger of fire season and over, with plenty of time to prepare, makes a lot of sense to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael H., I am going to allow you to talk. Please unmute your mic.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Hi, my name is Michael Honig. I also am calling for a number of families. I can go through the list of names: the Peshes, the Birdwells, the Ashleys, the DiBartistas, the Steins, the Freights, the Hoffmeisters, the Smiths, and my wife and I. We represent over 25 students that will be going back to school, we hope. We would like to thank Dr. Wilson, Mrs. Stubbs, Mr. Heller for their very detailed report, and ask the board to vote in support of staff recommendations to get our kids back to school by November 2nd. Over 75%, well, I just a few more.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
No problem. Over 75% of the parents are comfortable with the new plan and want our kids back at the school. Our teachers want to get back to the classroom so they can teach our kids in the best environment. And our kids want to get back to school so they can get away from their parents. Our grocery stores are open, our theaters are open, our bars are even open. It is now time for our schools to reopen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would like to ask members of the public at this time if there is any further public comment to please hover at the bottom of your screen and click on the raise hand icon, or if you are a telephone user, to please press *9 now. Vice President, oh, I have one more comment here. Christina D, please unmute your mic.
Hi, thank you everyone for all the work that's been put into the presentation, and all of these efforts are Herculean, so thank you for all of that. I did have a question. I don't know if that's appropriate now, but I just wanted to verify that the schedule we're saying would be from 8 to 1, and just what is happening on the Boys and Girls Club front. Is there an option where that can still be an after-school program? And at one point it was circulated that you had to pick either going to school or going to the Boys and Girls Club, but you could not do both. And I'm just not understanding, or I guess asking if there is a way to consider how going to school and leveraging the Boys and Girls Club, how those two programs could work in concert, because right now it's become like an either or situation. And I'm just wondering what thought could be put into making that a workable solution, whether it's different cohorts or some scenario where we're not picking one or the other.
Thank you. I would like to invite caller with the last 4 digits, 8406. You may go ahead and speak now. Caller with the last 4 digits of 8406, you may unmute your mic to provide public comment at this time. Vice President Pelosi, I believe we should move on to the next public comment. That would be the caller with the last 4 digits, 4033. You may unmute your mic to speak, 4033. We will move on to the next caller, Rosa C. Please unmute your mic. Rosa C. The next public comment, Alex A. Alex, you may unmute your mic.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Boving-Allen, and thank you so much for the thoughtful and detailed proposal. It's clear that a tremendous amount of thought and work went into it, and grateful as always to hear it. I'm voicing support of return in January, primarily from my position as a clinical child and adolescent psychologist in our community. I've seen, and clinically and firsthand with my own children, the great stress and toll that it has taken to have continual disruption from stress related to the pandemic, fires, displacement, evacuation, and now coming back to school, going through the adjustment of how different that will look even under the best of circumstances. And then in the case that there were to be an infection, having that close down again and further disruption in the midst of breaks that'll be in place from holidays anyway. This return to school prior to the end of the semester also causes significant disruption to the families whose children are not electing to return, often due to existing vulnerabilities like living in multi-generational households, needing to protect the older family members with whom they live, or living with immunocompromise of either the child's self or a family member. So I urge a vote in support of not returning in November and waiting for January. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Madrigal, are there more public comments?
Yes, Elaine L, I am going to allow you to talk. Please unmute your mic to provide public comment.
What did you say, Mom? Hi, thank you for the details that you provided today. It's information that we've been looking forward to, and we appreciate the effort that's been put into it. I would like to ask for reconsideration for the distance learning program for the middle school and high school. Something that I would like to see on the remote or the distance learning front is an equitable, accessible, and quality program provided to parents who cannot send their kids to in-person school. And I feel that a quality program requires real-time interaction with teacher and student, as well as be part of the experience. So my request is to reconsider the APEX program as a remote learning option for middle school and high school. And perhaps, while I know it's not easy to facilitate, but with such a small class, is it an option to have, 10 or 15 students be in class with the teacher and have a handful be remote via a Zoom type of setup, so they can still be, again, listen to the participation, listen to the interaction, and be more included in that classroom setting. So that would be my request, to reconsider the remote program offered at the middle school and high school level. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Madrigal, do we have more comments?
Yes, we have 4 more attendees who would like to publicly comment. I have Gladys H. Is that permissible for one more?
Ms. Madrigal, I just want to be cognizant of our time limit. I think we might be at the point where I might need to make a recommendation to my trustees to extend it just another 15 minutes, given the amount that are left to talk. Consensus, trustees? I look like I have it. Yes? Okay. Okay, then let's carry on, please.
Gladys H.
Hello, my name is Gladys Hernandez. Can everyone hear me clearly? I am a second-year employee at St. Helena Unified School District. I teach at the primary school. I'm going to fight my emotion because I don't want to see my emotions seen as a weakness, rather as a strength. I love the St. Helena Unified School District and its community. I've only been here, as I say, this is my second year. I teach second grade at the primary school. And I feel strongly in my heart for all the families in our district. And I know I use this word, I have fallen in love with our district and the community and its wide, diverse representation inside my classroom. However, I highly disagree with the idea that the staff recommended us coming back on November 2nd. I did not recommend that. I know that we've had what seems like to be a long time to prepare for us coming back, but we have not been prepared adequately enough. We lost 2 weeks pretty much of time during these fires, and we are getting back only 1 in order to fully prepare for our students and for our families. I am faced with the decision of trying to decide if I'm going to keep my whole class or if it's going to be all mixed and I will lose part of my class. I, once again, am adamantly asking for a little more time. I don't know if that is January, but I am asking for more time for us to prepare and really hammer out what we're going to do for our students when they come back. I do not feel safe yet coming back as a teacher. And I don't do this because I have not worked arduously these last 7 months to prepare for my students. I do this because I want everyone to feel safe coming back. Once again, I'd like to thank our board and our district level employees, our superintendent, everyone for all the work that this has come into. And I would like to say that I teach at St. Helena, and I am not in agreement with coming back on November 2nd. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
I am now unmuting Bianca C. Please unmute your mic so you may provide public comment.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Bianca, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to thank the District 1 for putting this presentation together. It sounds like you guys have really been listening to feedback and parents and, guidelines from counties and other districts. So I just wanted to thank you on that. And I just wanted to ask the board to really take into consideration the children's well-being mentally when they're making this decision, that our children are suffering when it comes to their mental health. Anybody that thinks that this is okay on children's mental health should really do some research. I also just am curious if maybe the board or if people have reached out to actual fire victims to see what they would want. My mom brought up some studies. She's in some child psychology study programs, and this fire is very traumatic on the families that have lost their homes, and them going back to school would provide them some normalcy and be allowed to be around other children that have dealt with this, be around their peers, just have another reinforcement instead of them currently being displaced in hotels, not having a home, not having any peers. So before we just jump to the gun and say that they would rather be home or that it would be more difficult, I think from who I've talked to, it would be more beneficial. So I just want to say thank you guys. Again, these kids have been all out around town. These kids are working again. They're at the grocery stores. Their families are taking them on vacations. So I think it is in their best interest to go back. And I thank you guys for doing this.
Thank you.
I would like to allow Ashley W. to talk. Please unmute your mic.
Hi, I'm Ashley Wright. I teach at the, what school do I teach at? The elementary school. I've been there for 26 years, and I'm a graduate of the school system. So I have a lot invested in the community, and I wasn't going to speak because I don't feel my voice matters, but I am going to stick up because of Gladys. And I feel like the district has done a big disservice in saying that this is a staff recommendation, because it's not a staff recommendation, it's a district staff recommendation. And so I just felt like I needed to say that. And I'm very proud of you, Gladys, for speaking up. And thank you for being brave and doing that. Thank you.
Derek R., I'm allowing you to talk. Please unmute your mic.
Hi, can you hear me?
Okay, hi. Actually, this is Derek's wife, Julie. Good evening, board. Please let our children go back to school. If the government says it's safe for kids to return, I feel like that should be good enough. At the board meeting before school started, we were promised that if we were able to stay as a county off the watch list for 2 weeks, that the schools would open immediately following that 2-week period. And obviously that didn't happen. And then we were at least given a date of October 26th, which we were disappointed, but we are trying to be accepting that you really weren't ready. And at least we had a date to rely on. Now you are saying that you're still not ready. And I guess I just don't understand why we're still not ready. When I heard that the teachers union was pushing to keep the schools closed till January, it felt like we were being punched in the gut. It's a very hopeless feeling that the schools are never going to open. We don't want to leave St. Helena School. We love our schools. For the sake of our kids' education and for the sake of their emotional well-being, let them go in person. This isolation is not good for them. I know that you said that you as a school district and a school board want to open, and I really do believe you. I have heard that you've made great safeguards and adjustments to the school campuses to make them safe for the kids, and it sounds like you're more than prepared. And as for those of us who live in Deer Park and Angwin who have evacuated twice now, remote learning has been a logistical nightmare. Our kids were doing their Zoom lessons from hotel rooms and family members' houses during the Lightning Complex evacuations. And then now that we're back from our second evacuation, we haven't had internet restored up here on the mountain. Data isn't working either. You guys gave us a hotspot. We appreciate that. Thank you. But it unfortunately doesn't work. Power lines have burned down. We're living off the grid up here. And remote learning is not even an option for us. Every day since the glass fire, we've been sending our son to different friends' houses in St. Helena to do his work. If school would just open, we wouldn't be this complicated for us, and it would bring some sense of normalcy to this chaotic time. Please consider what the majority of us parents want. Please listen to what we're telling you. And if you do give us a new start date, please stick to that date and honor your promises that you've made to your parents and your students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one final public comment. Rosa C. Rosa C.
Hello,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay, my English is a little limited, but you guys have talked about going back for regular kids. But what about the special aid kids? My daughter is the special aid, so she won't keep her mask all day long as required. So she's gonna run to hug her peers. She won't listen to teachers about, well, she might not. But what about those kids? What's going to be with them?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, Ms. Madrigal, that concludes public comment.
We have another public comment. Lauren P. Please unmute your mic to speak.
Hi, this is Lauren Pesh. Michael Honig spoke, represented me in some of my thoughts, but I just wanted to, as I was listening to everybody's comments, I wanted to bring up the fact that we are failing children who are not privileged enough to have parents that hire tutors and teachers. A lot of these parents that are okay with not going back to school, they've hired fancy teachers and tutors. And we're failing children who don't have the financial means to be able to have a tutor teach them or a teacher at their home teaching them. I hope that you guys take into consideration that some of these kids are really struggling and they have parents that go to work and have to go to work and don't have the luxury of staying home and making sure that their first grader is on their virtual Zoom meetings all day. And we need to get these kids back to school. It's not fair. You're widening a gap. When you go to school, it's an even playing field for these kids. And it's not fair to children who can't hire tutors. So please take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that was the last one, so we can be prepared to close public comment. Oh, no? Marie, one more?
We have one additional public comment. We are coming up to the 11-minute mark of your 15-minute extension.
Okay, so one more. Well, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Christina, please unmute your mic so you may provide public comment.
Thank you very much. Very briefly, I just wanted to second the comments of Elaine Lund. If we are thinking of the entire student body and respecting the wishes of people who don't feel comfortable coming back, let's not leave our students in the lurch with a second-rate program that's meant to only recover credits. And I'm speaking specifically of the APEX program which also has not been explained to any of us, except for very briefly in this meeting. But I don't feel comfortable sending my son back to school, and I also don't feel comfortable giving him multiple choice type program for the rest of the year. Additionally, I'm not clear as to what would happen in January after the holiday with people who have chosen remote learning, if they have a choice to come back then, or if it's remote for the rest of the year and Apex for the rest of the year. So I'm just urging you to reconsider that choice and to possibly allow those students to continue with remote learning as they are, even if it might not be exactly the same. Zoom in the classroom is obviously a possibility that really should be considered and would be the least disruptive for those students. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. At this point, public comment will be closed, and I would like to just reiterate a big thank you to those who participated through the Zoom and who submitted written comments as well. We do appreciate your feedback. Trustees, what I was thinking at this time, that first I would ask to see if there were any clarifying questions you wanted to ask before we then moved on to our discussion and deliberation. Maybe you needed to ask a question or two in order to finalize your thoughts or things like that. Are you guys agreeable to that? Yes? Okay, thank you. So I will start by asking if any of you have some questions to please go ahead and do so at this time. No question? Oh, okay.
Good evening. Good evening. I have a couple of questions, and they're actually the questions that I had on my mind that I heard within the public comment as well. And this would be the relationship that we would keep with the Boys and Girls Club. How is that looking? Because I know that we've been working with them since March. So that would be my first question.
Trustee Pelosi, would you like us to answer the questions as they come?
I think that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, we have been in constant communication with the Boys and Girls Club. In fact, both the executive director and the director sit on our transition and our emergency team. They have been serving essential workers, children, since during the summer. And part of their protocols require that they maintain a stable cohort similar to our primary and elementary school. And so at this time, they did announce maybe prior to the fires and evacuations that they would be open for distance learning students only through December. They have hired a credentialed teacher that is the learning coach, and that credentialed teacher, along with their other staff, will be supporting students from, I believe it's either 8 o'clock or 8:30 in the morning until up to 5 o'clock at night. So families of essential workers and those in need could potentially work with the Boys and Girls Club. The child would be there for a minimum potentially of the distance learning portion of their day, or could potentially be there for the full day. We explored the idea around having Boys and Girls Club serve the schools separately, the primary school and the elementary school. And the challenge is that they would need to have an employee for every cohort, for every class, even if it was 1 or 2 children, because the protocols for the primary and the elementary school, the guidance from the county and the state talk about those stable cohorts. So again, to clarify, they're offering Boys and Girls Club for families of distance learning students only this year, until December at least.
Okay. And then my other question that I have was similar to Elaine and Christina as well, is just the using Apex, which I understand because it's a matter of being able to use our teachers for our students and things if we're in person. But my question is Now, is there some way where there could be a camera or something like a video of the instruction, so that could be at the same time as that distance learning student is watching, or even a recording so that they could watch it at another time?
I'll take that one. So yes, in talking about the TK5, first of all, those are in stable cohorts, so we're able to manage and move staff around to provide distance learning. And it, unfortunately, since secondary education at the middle and high school has multiple teachers, to pull staff to be able to do something like that just is not feasible with our current staffing and their current caseloads or their current student loads in their classes. So, you know, the challenge there is we did explore the concept of having the camera on in the classroom, and teachers, some of the feedback was that those students that are watching, the teacher's going to be unaware if they're lost or they're falling behind or they have questions. If you think of just an algebra class, since that's all we can remember in some ways from our experience in high school, if you don't get the first step of solving an equation and you're lost after that, and the teacher proceeds for 10 more minutes in this whole problem, and you don't have the ability to ask a question or have them repeat or do something like that, that lesson's not going to be very valuable for you. So we felt that in managing those two different environments of just turning the camera on and having students watch but be really unable to participate with their teacher while the teacher's at a distance in the classroom and doesn't really have access to checking in on the distance learning class, that really puts those students at a disadvantage. So we felt in the end that Apex Learning would serve those students in a better capacity than just watching something on the video. Your other question about recording that is something teachers have the ability to do in their classrooms, is to record their lessons. That is an optional type of way of delivering instructions that they could upload to their Google Classroom. And I know that's been done with some of the asynchronous activities that the district has provided for our students this year. So it can be done. I don't know if that's the best way of delivering instruction, though, is to record a lesson and then put it up on a website where there's no ability for students to ask questions, as they go along.
And I was also in that same vein, I was like thinking about the flipped classroom too, in a sense of, maybe even being able to use something like that. But I'll go ahead and stop right now for other people's questions.
Thank you, Jeannie. Somebody else like to step forward with some questions? Julio?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. One of the questions I had was about the reopening November 2nd and kind of the thought process about skipping the hybrid step and just going directly into the 5 day in person, and just a little bit of a kind of I thought the idea was to potentially practice some of the protocols and go through the procedure. So I'm just wondering what the kind of thought process was behind that recommendation.
Mr. Heller, do you want to take that question, or would you like me?
Sure, you could take it.
I'll start, and if I miss the piece, let me know. At the point where we were directed by the governing board to reopen the enrollment form, when we looked at the numbers of families requesting the distance learning, and we looked at the number of students that would be in person, because of our class size and because of the logistics of our school sites, we felt confident that we could go straight to the 5-day in-person model and train the students and the parents through those parent nights and videos. We believe we can move forward with the 5-day in-person at this time.
Mary Lou, if I may just add on to that. Julio, this is Mary. And the thought as well is that when they come back in person, is they would be practicing within the first couple of days in the school. So it's not like they're going straight into content. The first couple of days would be the modeling and the practicing as well.
Any further questions?
Yeah, can I go one more?
Yes.
Thank you for that. The other one was regarding just kind of in general the day in the life the sheets that we were provided. So those were very good to look at and to kind of just obviously like Mr. Cinto said, they're living documents. So I know that they potentially will change. Just a thought in terms of I know the primary school and the elementary have drop-off points. And just kind of looking at the primary in particular, just thinking of as far as the kids that are going to be being dropped off, and parents not being allowed to get out of the car to either walk them to the class or walk them in that direction, or vice versa when you're picking them up as well. If we've thought about potentially having parent volunteers, because I know it would probably be a lot of work for the teacher, or I don't even know how much staff we have to do that, but even just having parent volunteers for the, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 minutes that could do that, they could just help usher those sections in. And like I said, that just, my concern is like for, South Crane and all that area, the parking gets pretty congested in the morning. So, and you don't go to the same spot. So like really, if I'm picking up my daughter and I'm saying, oh, I'll meet you here, it's like how, the communication piece. So I just know that it would be a lot to be running kids in and out from those different areas. So I just a thought as far as maybe potentially looking at parent volunteers just for that morning piece where they're dropping off and picking up.
Thank you for those suggestions, Trustee Olguin. I know that Mrs. Sanguinetti was taking notes as you were writing, and she will use those to investigate next steps.
Great. Trustee Conwell, questions? Okay. Trustee Haug?
Yes, my question is a little bit on the same vein as Julio's. And it was regarding our buses. Will we be having extra staff assigned to disembarking and loading the buses at the sites? And maybe just a little bit more explanation of how the busing will work. And also if we have the numbers of the students participating in busing.
Transportation Director Andy Stubbs.
Thank you. So we don't have the numbers yet of the students that are participating. I anticipate it'll be close to what we had last year with some obvious reductions. And how we're managing transportation, it's based on the Napa County Office of Education guidelines. And so parents will be conducting health screenings. The drivers will be following their own protocols of, for example, loading the rear of the bus first. We will have a partition between the driver and the students, and everybody, including the driver, will be required to wear masks. And the bus driver will have a supply of disposable masks to provide if somebody's forgotten a mask. Because we have so many bus stops, we won't have people, and we want to preserve space on the bus. We won't have anybody riding the bus with the children. And we were beginning to consider how we might incorporate some monitors to help get the children off the buses and off to class. And the enrollment packets, the second round of enrollment documentations that have gone out include the bus applications. And so we'll be refining our routes when we receive those back. Additionally, the buses are going to be washed monthly and coated with a special disinfectant on the inside every month. And the drivers will have the electrostatic sprayer so that they can spray down the buses at the end of the day. And they'll have wipes and so forth as well.
Thank you. Any more? Trustee Haug, any other further questions? No. Trustee Brody?
Yes, I have one, and thank you, Trustee Haug, for asking about the buses, because I have it in all caps and with 3 question marks on my little note sheet. I just had a quick clarifying question about the fuel education program, because on the slide it said that the fuel education program was continuing. So but then I thought I heard something about the fuel education program being open. So is the fuel education program continuing, or is it open again for new enrollment?
Good question, Mr. Browdy. The fuel education program will continue to be available to new families in the TK5 grade span. It cannot be available to new families at this time in the 6-12 because of the grading practices and the assignments and the semester and or trimester process. Marianne or Chris, did I miss any aspect of fuel education?
No, and also for folks that are on fuel education currently, Joe, at the high school and middle school level, they can continue with fuel as long as they'd like to. So that's still available to the folks that are on the fuel program.
Great, thank you.
Anything further, Joe? No. Okay, I've got 2 questions actually. And my first one is, do we happen to know at this point the number of staff members that potentially will not be able to return should we open due to medical reasons? Do we have any idea if we are going to have holes in staffing? That's first one. And then my second is a comment and a question. I'm going to be quite candid to say that I'm disappointed that we're left with Apex as well. I know that Dr. Wilson has also, she's not the #1 cheerleader for having to bring that on board either. And I guess I really want to make sure that we have explored all the possibility with our Teachers Association that is there nothing that we can do to keep those kids who want to stay with their teacher? The students want to stay with their teachers as much as they possibly can, particularly in the 6 through 12 grades. And I'm just wondering if there's more collaboration and conversation needed to talk amongst the parties to see if we can give it a try. I have to believe that Zoom is not the perfect platform where all teachers can monitor all kids at one time either. So I don't know. And I'm not trying to throw a wrench into the situation at the bottom of the 9th, 2 outs. That's not my intention here. I just know that, that Apex is what we use primarily for credit recovery. It's not something that we really ever intended to use as a platform for remote learning. So I want to trust that those conversations have happened. And I don't know if there's lack of support for the position or what it may be, but I just would like to encourage as much more conversation on that before kids get back in those classrooms to see if we can, address that issue for those who want to stay remotely. So I'll stop there and I'll let you answer my first question.
I'll take the first question. The first question you asked and in consultation with SHGA President Brandon Farrell, we know of, I would say, less than 5 at this point. So he and I will meet next week to review each of those in what's called an interactive process to determine accommodations we can make for each of those employees. At this time, that's certificated. And then I think the same number applies right now for our classified staff, so under 5. And so we would need to continue to work on that in our discussions with CSEA Chapter 287 President Christina D.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Heller. Yes, Corinne, you want to comment? Dr. Wilson, Corinne wanted to.
If you would like, I could address what Ben and I and everybody involved has talked about in terms of your second question, Dr. Wilson. Okay. Is that acceptable? So we understand that that's the ideal situation for families, and we would have loved to be able to provide that. One of the huge issues that parents probably are not familiar with is credentialing. So in the K-5 arena, you can essentially peel one teacher off and just assign kids because it's self-contained, and that works. For Mr. Cinto and myself, that is not the case because you can't have a teacher with a science credential be in an English class. And Mr. Cinto, it's especially it ended up being not feasible, but one of the issues they have at the high school, for as an example, is there might be one section of physics and that teacher's doing other things. So they can't teach an additional section of physics to the distanced kids and to the ones who aren't. And we spent a lot of time talking about, is there a way to do it? Like there's just a Zoom camera somehow on the teachers. And when we really started digging into that, it just ended up being such an ineffective model for learning for the distanced kids. So frustrating. I really think parents and children would hate it once they tried it. Once we really thought about it, it's also impossible to do for classes with activities like, for example, PE, where they're not standing in one place. Right. So there was a huge list of reasons why we just could not come up with a way to do that was a decent education for kids, because that was our priority, is what's the best thing we can do for kids. It would be our staff, but the credentialing issues are not, we couldn't work around it.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate having additional information. Thank you. Trustee Haug, one moment, because Jeannie Kerr had a question first.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. So I'm still on the conversation about Apex, and my question is how does it look? What's the vision as far as including the staff with the Apex students? I mean, what does that look like as far as the relationship and things then?
Mr. Heller?
Well, Ben has the most experience with Apex, so he could speak to that probably better, and how that program looks in design. Ben, can you hear me?
Yep, I'm back on now. So basically, how we currently run Apex, and I first need to let you know, Apex was initially set up as an AP provided distance learning program. That's how they got their start, was providing classes to schools that could not bring in that kind of staffing. So how we currently do it at the high school, we do credit recovery with Apex for English and social studies only, because if students get credit deficient, there's a 4-year requirement. There's no other time to do that. But I believe what Mr. Heller is speaking to in terms of staff involvement is the potential to utilize a single science teacher to monitor the various science subjects that students are involved in. So somebody would have to have an understanding of chemistry, biology, environmental science, physics. That's one of the challenges about utilizing our staff to continue distance learning, is we have 44 classes that there's only one of, and then you have multiple teachers who have 5 different preps. So to just say each teacher continues with their current students, it's impossible. You would have to have a 16-hour workday. So in terms of student and staff interaction, I believe that's what the oversight and monitoring would consist of, is basically providing additional support, monitoring and grading student work. And that's something we have done in the past with a few one-off situations where students have had to take Apex coursework that is not English and social studies. And you could correct me if I misspoke, Mr. Heller.
No, I think that's the intent, is to have a core curricular area teacher monitor the progress of students. But as Ben said, it would be challenging to get a student's 1 through 6 schedule, since they're all so very different with singletons and times offered during the day, and just say, we're going to make that all online for students, unless, we would have to make some internal changes too. So this seems to be the most efficient, expedient way to go.
Okay.
May I add on to that, Chris and Ben? How I see that too with Apex is that fuel ed for the secondary level, it was rocky to start, and now we're a little smoother on that. The reason we'd like to go to Apex is we have control of Apex. We get to monitor and see what's going on with Apex. As with fuel ed, we don't have control of all of that. And also at the middle school and the high school level, we would bring in our math to exactly what Mr. Cinto said, grade and help support those students in math. And we do the same thing at the middle school level, as well as if we see students struggling in other areas, we could bring in our own support for that. That's why we want to utilize APEX.
And I think I remember that APEX is also not only credit recovery, used for credit recovery, but also for acceleration as well, right?
It's used for all courses. So absolutely. We use it for credit recovery, but exactly what Mr. Cinto said, you can use it for grade level courses, physics courses we don't offer, and AP courses.
Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you.
Trustee Haug?
It was actually that comment on Apex that I wanted to address, because I think that what is maybe worrying parents is that Apex is being listed as a credit recovery program, whereas I have personal experience in a child taking Apex as an acceleration program and being very successful with the Apex program. So maybe my daughter's experience is not the most common, but she is now in AP Stats and calculus, college calculus, after taking accelerated Apex the summer of her freshman year for Math 2. So I'm just offering to other board members that it is also an acceleration program. It's rigorous. And how many years have our staff been working with the program? Maybe that would help instill confidence. We have a number of staff members that I know have been working with the program for many years.
I think it's about 8 or 9 years now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Trustees? Yes, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could just continue this little conversation about Apex just from a student perspective and kind of hopping onto what Trustee Haug just said. I feel like if after using Apex for this many years, I think we would have a very firm understanding of if it worked and if it didn't work. And I would assume that after many years, if we decided it did not work, we especially wouldn't use it in a situation like this. I am a little worried about the use of the program in this setting, though, and across multiple classes. Just because, again, one of the things we talk about is just student engagement, and we would like to students, I, as a student, like to be engaged with my teachers, and just seeing the word monitoring doesn't really inspire confidence. So I would definitely encourage on behalf of the students, and I understand that this is especially hard at the upper grade levels, but that teachers do make themselves available, specialized teachers do make themselves available for some sort of intervention, because especially with online learning, it is very easy to get lost. And so I think that teachers should make themselves readily available, especially to those students that would choose to stay online with Apex.
Thank you. Joe Brody, you are wise beyond your years. Okay, at this point, if there's no other trustee questions, what I think I would like to move forward with is we can have a discussion. If you have something prepared you'd like to read before we move into an action, I would like to open that up. And perhaps Trustee Conwell, would you like to go ahead and start with that?
Yes, absolutely. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. I'm in a public place, so I just have to make sure everybody can hear me. My comments, the short answer is I'm fully in favor of the recommendation to open schools as quickly as possible. I do understand that we had a 2-week setback with the fires, and so to push it only a week later to me is quite commendable for November 2nd to start. But it has to be when the administration feels it's safe to do so. My long answer is the longest, so that's why I didn't ask any questions. So please bear with me while I cover it. First of all, great news that we're going into orange. That even makes it more to me that we got to get moving in our schools. I stated publicly back in August at a board meeting that my biggest concern as a trustee on this issue was our teachers were going to dictate when we could go back to our schools. The letter from the president of the St. Helena Unified Teacher Association in October really confirmed my previous suspicion. Hearing from our parents, I'm getting a clear message. They want in-person instruction to resume as quickly as possible. When I focus on what's best for the students, the answer is again, in-person instruction is possible. Now, will in-person instruction in November be smooth for the first couple of days? The simple answer is no. There are way too many variables. Which teachers will be absent? Which will we be able to get substitutes? Which students are going to show up in each classroom? Will we have enough desks to outfit each room with physical distancing? Will one class have 5 students and another have 20? What will transportation look like? All you have to do is start creating some scenarios, and you'll see we have way too many variables to solve. I believe it is in the best to get in-person instruction started, and then we can let the professionals adapt and create the best learning environments for our students. And that is why I'm an advocate for the 5 days a week as soon as possible. And I can see that with what our administration site leaders are doing. They've started up with a plan. They're hoping that there's going to be a guideline, there's something to follow, but they're willing to change. And that to me is exactly what's going to have to happen. It's going to be adapting on the fly to figure out what works, and nobody better to do it than the actual professionals that are there every day. I also wanted to address the fear discussion. Will one of our students or staff get COVID? The answer is most likely yes. To combat this reality, we've installed and will require our staff and students to use personal protective gear and strict following of health protocols.
Trustee Conwell, Conwell, I think the interpreter is asking for a moment to catch up.
Sure.
So if I can just pause for.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Give me translators. You can give me a thumbs up when you're ready. Okay. Ready to proceed?
Okay, sorry about that. I was trying to be quick to use up time, or not use up time, and I wasn't thinking about translators. I'm going to go back to this paragraph, which is, I'd like to address the fear discussion. Will one of our students or staff get COVID? The answer is most likely yes. To combat this reality, we've installed and require our staff and students to use personal protective gear and strict following of health protocols. We must not let children or staff come to school if anyone shows the sign of illness. I believe remote online learning K through 12 is not in the best interest of a majority of students. Online learning works only when you have families that are dedicated to teaching their children during and outside their online classes every single day. Most parents are not academic teachers. We can kind of pretend for a week or two, but it's not in our skill set. We rely on teachers to instruct. Opening school is a risk versus reward scenario. The risk is obvious, contracting or spreading COVID. The reward is much harder to quantify. Is it mastering your multiplication tables by the 3rd grade, or reading at grade level, or scoring a 5 on an AP exam? The reward is if the protocols are followed, then students will be back in their classrooms with their friends, albeit 6 feet apart. Teachers will be able to instruct again, in person, giving nonverbal clues to aid in the success of their students. It will be a different style of education with all the PPE on, but the students will adapt, start to thrive in schools again. I was reminded by this on Monday after I left the superintendent's office and I drove by the high school pool. The ways were conducting practice, or I should say getting ready to start practice. I noticed a line of students, each student standing 6 feet apart, patiently waiting to get health checked prior to entering the pool before practice. I think in so many cases it will be very easy for the students to adapt and much harder for the adults. While the administration is mitigating the risks, the reward far outweighs giving our students an opportunity to excel again, once again in the classroom. I strongly support the recommendation to reopen our schools. I slowed down a little bit there at the end.
Thank you very much, Trustee Conwell. Trustee Howe, would you like to proceed next?
Yes, and bear with me. Tonight I also have a prepared statement that I would like to read. I will, for this time only, share some recent personal experiences because they did have a bearing on the decision that I will make tonight. On Tuesday, September 29th, I effectively lost my job at Meadowood when the building I worked in burned down. The next day, I was in Sacramento in the hospital undergoing emergency brain surgery for the treatment of an aneurysm. During my recovery, I've been unable to fill all the duties of board president, and I would like to thank Lisa Pelosi for her job as acting board president, and all fellow board members and administrative staff for their support. While I was in ICU recovering from my brain surgery, the man in the room next to me died from COVID complications due to COVID-19. He had recovered from COVID 2 weeks earlier and died from multiple blood clots. The man was not elderly, and it was heartbreaking to hear that the doctors could not allow family members to be with him before he passed away. I saw his body as it was wheeled past my cubicle on a gurney. It was a horrible experience, one that I would guess very few people in this town have had, and it made a life-changing impression on me. I tell this story because there are some, very few, but they exist, people in our community who do not take this disease seriously. I see middle schoolers and high schoolers walking around town in groups without masks and not socially distancing. Parents have asked in public comment what they can do to help the school reopen. I say this: make your children wear a mask in public and practice better social distancing. This message goes especially to our teenagers. Seeing some students' behavior around town, I totally understand the concern of our teachers and staff over a return to in-class learning. Those very few people in our community with a cavalier attitude towards the disease will be the people holding us back. I know we are all suffering from COVID fatigue, but we cannot let our guard down. If we are not vigilant, we will have an outbreak that will shut our schools down for in-person instruction all over again. If you want to stay in-person learning as proposed by the administration, wear a mask, practice social distancing, wash your hands. If you don't take this pandemic seriously, you will be the reason that we have to return to distance learning. Another way where parents can help the district is to get their information from the district website, not from unofficial sources. Start watching our board meetings. They are once a month. As for parents who have chosen to remain in distance learning, I fully support you and understand your choice. While the proposed distance learning programs going forward will be a little different than the current model, I'm fully confident in the administration's proposed plan. As a parent of a student who completed 2 courses through Apex, I know that our staff is very familiar with the programs for the upper grades and will be able to support students in meaningful learning. At the same time, I know there will be challenges in the new distance learning format, but I am convinced that the administration will be able to respond to those challenges as they arise. I would like to thank our district classified staff and the work they have done to put our safety measures in place. Our school site staff, our custodians, food service, and ground staff have been working every day on campus to ensure that we have the safest possible environment for our students and staff. I would like to thank our Director of Facilities, Joe, specifically. We have a great team, and they will be the key that allows us to return to in-person instruction safely. I truly believe that our PPE and safety procedures are some of the most well thought out in the state, if not the country, and I have looked at other schools, and ours are really detailed. I would also like to thank our administrative staff and Superintendent Dr. Mary Lou Wilson. I want to thank them for the work they have completed in such a challenging environment. They've come to work every day, day after day, to put all the protocols in place so that we can return to school in person. I know that the extra time that they have asked for in reopening is because they are the experts who know best how our district works and our specific needs. They are the experts, period. Do not listen to what you find on social media sites. The information is often false, misleading, and irresponsible. I understand the concerns of our teaching staff. I spent 8 years as a substitute classroom aide for the Napa County Office of Education, working mostly in our county preschools. I know how quickly illnesses can spread in a classroom. At the same time, earlier this week, I called the St. Helena Child Care Center and let them know that they're operated by NCOE, and let them know that I am back on the roster as a substitute aide in the classroom. My job at Meadowood is not coming back anytime soon. I spoke to the director of the St. Helena Child Care Center, and I am confident that with appropriate safety measures, a return to an in-person format is what a majority of our children want and need. The St. Helena Child Care Center from NCOE has been open for over a month in person. As board president, I am not asking our staff to do anything that I will not do myself. I support the administration's recommendation to return to in-person instruction on November 2nd.
Thank you very much, President Howe. Trustee Ogeen, I'll have you speak next. I just want to remind the trustees that we want to be mindful of our translators' presence and services they're providing. So we're going to try and go to about 7:15 this evening, if at all possible, allowing everybody to get their opportunity to speak, okay? So Trustee Ogeen, you can go next, please.
Thank you. I prepared a statement as well. These last few months since the pandemic began have been challenging and difficult and have affected all of us in different ways. Our community has been tested most recently with the fires that devastate our friends and families and the surrounding communities. We are currently facing a situation with the pandemic that we have never faced before, and I believe that everyone is doing the best that they can. For myself, the safety, mental, and social emotional well-being of our children and staff continues to be the top priority. There has been tremendous thought, work, and effort from our district, which has included guidance from the state, county, and local agencies that have provided specific guidelines to best prepare and plan for an in-person student return. I also want to acknowledge the community's participation, which has provided valuable input at this time. I want to recognize the work that our teachers and principals have done thus far under these circumstances. I know that many of you did not expect to be teaching in this climate, but I commend you on your willingness and flexibility to do what is best for our students. I also recognize that your concerns and questions about this possible return are valid and will continue to be addressed as we move forward, which is why this decision is very difficult and complex. Our district has provided options for those families who choose to return and also for those families that want to remain in distance learning. I respect everyone's personal decision. The district has followed all recommended safety guidelines to ensure that our students and staff are safe. I want to be clear that in order for this to be successful, we need to stress to our community the importance of following these guidelines. It's not just the responsibility of our teachers and staff to keep our students safe. It's the parents' responsibility to teach and educate our children about these guidelines prior to returning. Finally, our community needs to unite and work together during these times of uncertainty by continuing to collaborate, communicate, and showing empathy as we adjust to our changing climate moving forward.
Thank you very much, Trustee Olguin. Trustee Kerr?
I haven't prepared a statement. However, that doesn't mean that I don't think about this every single day, probably more than I probably more than I think about anything at this point. And as coming to this meeting, I have a lot on my mind, and there's always a lot of questions and, what if, and I come back to also words such as partnership and collaboration and working together, following guidelines, and practice. And I feel as though this is the time to reopen our schools for in-person learning. I think it's very important for our students. I think it's very important for our families. And I think it's very important for our community because it means that we're moving forward. It's been a very long 7 months for everyone. We all have our own COVID experiences. I know our family has had COVID experiences. And it's hard because you have to sometimes think, like, for me personally, I just continue to think optimistically. I'm internally, I'm always optimistic about everything. And I feel very, very comfortable in all of the work that's been done since March. I think that, I know that it's been a very, very heavy lift for everyone. Our entire St. Helena Unified School District employees, our parents, our students, our community members, and it's, like I said, we're actually a very fortunate district in our county right now. Our whole county is actually fortunate in knowing that we can go back to school, and I feel very fortunate being part of this district, knowing that all of our employees have been working towards this all summer long and throughout the spring as well. So I'm very comfortable in the recommendation of our district administration at this time.
Thank you very much, Trustee Kerr. I will wrap it up, and I have a statement that I prepared, so I'll read that. Bear with me, please. I would like to start with a sentiment of thanks to our parents and students. Thank you for being patient. Thank you for filling in the surveys, for emailing and calling with your feedback and questions. Thank you to those making an effort to truly understand what it is at stake to reopen schools. Thank you for being at-home educators to your children. Thank you to all of our St. Helena Unified faculty and school site staff members. There is no doubt that these have been some of the most challenging months of your careers. I am sure you miss being with students and having that person-to-person interaction. Your presence for our students is valued and appreciated. To Dr. Wilson, Mr. Heller, Mrs. Stubbs, Miss Allen, Miss Madrigal, and all of our principals and our IT team, thank you for the energy, hours, and commitment to getting answers, working to get solutions, and wading through copious amounts of information to serve our students this year. To my fellow trustees, I know you, like I, have made huge efforts to stay engaged, aware, and educated on the issue at hand. Thank you for your service to St. Helena Unified. The district had been preparing for an October 26th start for in-person instruction for several weeks. The SHGA letter that was delivered on October 7th was a surprise to me. Our teachers' voice is important to the reopening process. They too are stakeholders in our students' education. Your concerns are not without merit, please know that. However, I will admit it left me thinking, now what? And that was very troubling and deflating. We know the hybrid model wasn't perfect. Rather, it was the model that allowed us to put all the planning into practice. It was in a collaboration alongside SHGA, and it was approved by SHGA. It was one piece of the pie in getting kids back on campuses, which has continuously remained the objective. I view return to in-person instruction as the opportunity to get our kids familiar with their retrofitted campuses and the protocols and practices for COVID safety. I do not see it solely about instructional minutes. Given all that has transpired in 2020 thus far, there is a part of me that simply says, Does this have to be defined strictly by instructional minutes? In-person instruction is an opportunity for our students and families to reacclimate with their school community, which in turn offer a spark for their social emotional health. If you are not intimately involved in the planning and logistics of public education during a pandemic, there is no way to know the myriad of tasks needed before kids get back in the seats. Navigating the hourly, daily, and weekly changes that are handed out from the state, county, and local levels will make your head spin, and our district staff, administrators, and Dr. Wilson have endured it day in and day out. In fact, collectively, we are all enduring it in our daily lives. I get it. Everybody is weary, frustrated, and seeking accurate and detailed information. Decisions have to be made by all stakeholders, and information has to be provided for those stakeholders to make those decisions. There is no one on this panel tonight who was not blind to the catch-22 of this situation. Having said that, a jumping off point is needed, and that is where the surveys came into play. Keep in mind that our teaching staff is a unionized organization. That means the parties have to come together to work in the best interests of students. Putting kids back in classrooms means we need teachers to also be in those classrooms. From my perspective, the fact is we did lose 2 working weeks with the glass fire, and it would not have been appropriate or even remotely sensitive to require staff attendance during that time or to send out the necessary paperwork for families to fill out. It was not even possible to know exactly how many of our families will be impacted until the wildfires were over. Staff not being present at work for 2 weeks did hamper momentum in the preparation to return. From the instructional standpoint, I would think our teachers have been preparing since school began, so that loss of 2 weeks should not derail the delivery of curriculum in returning to school. I use data presented by the county, our community, and our district to help in my decision-making process. I have listened, read, and heard what our families and employees want on both sides of this issue. What I've heard from our stakeholders who claim to support our system and claim to support our systems has been disheartening at times, and I'm really overcome by the subsequent division. COVID testing numbers for the county remain at acceptable levels, and the low percentage of cases has put us in the first week of the orange tier. That is indeed encouraging news. I have thought of little else since September 7th than what is best for students going forward. Education across the country is not flawless at this time. I feel it would be naive to think otherwise. This school year will test the reservoir of goodwill in every way possible. We all need to 100% commit to doing what is needed to stay in school. St. Helena Unified put forth a plan to reopen, and the majority of our families put their trust and faith in Dr. Wilson and the teachers that would happen when it was mandated that it was safe to do so. I also put my faith and trust in that. For me, students returning to in-person instruction is the equitable course of action I support. Thank you. So at this point, we can move on, and I will entertain a motion to approve. Oh, sorry.
Just a
sorry.
minute.
Sorry.
I said Trustee Browdy has his hand up. I think.
Oh, my apologies. I'm so sorry, Trustee Browdy. My apologies. See,
No
it's hard
worries.
sometimes to focus on all the screen.
I understand. I have prepared a few words, but first I'd like to apologize in advance if I get emotional. But I want to start. Oh, I'm so sorry. I just want to start by I apologize.
Take a moment, Joe. It's okay.
Joe, take a moment, and I'll be more than happy to jump in and answer Ms. Cueva's question in reference to special ed students. They will be coming back in person, and if should they want to stay distance, we will create a distance learning plan. So we'll be very individualized on that. And I just wanted to make sure we addressed her question before we left tonight.
Thank you very much, Ms. Allen.
And I'm going to jump in while we're waiting for Joe, if that's okay with you, Lisa?
Yes.
And just
Go ahead.
remind parents that students coming into 7th grade especially, and also the younger grades, need to have all of their immunizations in place before they can come back in person. I know it's been a lot going on. We've allowed it to push back. Normally, we wouldn't let them even have schedules or start, but since we were remote, they did. But I'm just taking this opportunity while we have a moment here to encourage parents to please take care of that so that when we do start back on November 2nd, your child can be there with us live.
Thank you, Corinne.
Great.
Barbara Dendera, our school nurse, would be thrilled that you mentioned that information. And while we are waiting on Joe, also I want to thank each of our principals who individually with their staff reached out to every one of our families to identify who was a fire victim and not. They talked with them, they counseled, they supported, they helped to get resources. We've accessed mental health support for those families if needed. In addition, hotspots were deployed, new devices, new school materials were deployed. They've been in contact with each of those families that have lost their homes and or their resources. And some of you board members, you mentioned that it's been a heavy lift, and it has been. And each day, as I've told them, this is a hard and difficult year. Another day brings us a new challenge, and every one of them gets up and every day and does the work to support our families and our employees. So thank you to each of our principals for that work and their staff that supported them in reaching out to every victim of the fire.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Trustee Brody, hello. Would you like to proceed?
Yes, I would like to apologize for delaying this very important decision. I'd like to start just by reintroducing myself to the members of the community. My name is Joe Brody. I am a senior at the high school. I started at the primary school in room 10 as a part of the MAP program. I then worked my way up to the elementary school, where I moved through the 3 classrooms that were right along Oak Street, which we aptly named the Oak Village. Then was a proud student of the RLS, and now an extremely proud senior at the high school. So I do not take this decision lightly. This district and this school community is a very important and part of who I am. But just in talking to students, in talking to community members, and talking to parents, and talking to teachers, there is no right answer when looking at a situation like this. Talking to students, I've heard students say, I need to be in person to succeed. I have students say, I don't feel comfortable going back to school. Again, there is no right answer. We see pros and cons, good things, bad things on either side. In online, there's such an important aspect of continuity that seems to be especially important when looking at the pandemic, when taking into account natural disasters. You also less interruptions to learning. It is more accessible online, and that gold star of the online learning, safety. But of course, in-person social emotional health is vitally important to students. Developing those relationships with their teachers, with their peers, and really being in an academic learning environment. As much as I appreciate the steps that the district has taken with online learning, I find myself waking up 5 minutes before class and just doing what I can to prepare. And I just don't think that is a healthy academic mechanism going forward. I know that it's just my personal take on the matter. But to make a long story short, I am in favor of the district staff administration. I would like to say that comes with 3 very important points that I would like to raise and have already been raised. 1, communication is key for all of our stakeholders. And one of the things that I talked about with my fellow students is that information needs to be put out in a manner accessible to all of our stakeholders. Information that needs to be put to the primary school students most likely will be put in a different manner than information put to the high school students. The second one is that training and safety protocols need to be locked down. I understand that there are just some kinks that can only be worked out in practice. So I think that in moving forward with this recommendation, we should make opportunities to practice. A very important point to me that was raised to me just this afternoon, that there is a large % of students across the district who have never been to the school that they now are a student of. We have kindergartners, we have third graders, we have sixth graders, and we have freshmen. At every single school site, there is a group of students who have never been on this campus. Communication and having these protocols down is key. And then also, if not most importantly, one thing that we talk a lot about, especially at the high school, is equity. Seems to be our go-to, our buzzword, equity. It is vitally important that as a district, if we pursue this recommendation, that we provide equitable access to any sort of information or to any sort of education. We asked our students and our parents to make a decision personally. We should not take away from a child's education because of the personal decision that they made. We as a district need to look at this equitably. Those are my main 3 points. I apologize, I'm starting to get emotional again, but just to summarize, I am in favor of this recommendation, but communication is key. Having these protocols and procedures down, an opportunity for students to practice is what is most important, and equity, equity, equity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. I really appreciate having your voice on this panel. Okay, we'll proceed. Pardon me one moment. There we go. I will entertain a motion to approve the staff recommendation begin 5-day in-person instruction and continue with distance learning for selected families starting on Monday, November 2nd, 2020 as presented. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Please call the roll.
Trustee Browdy.
Aye.
Trustee Conwell.
Aye.
Trustee Kerr.
Aye.
Trustee Oldgeen.
Aye.
Trustee Haug.
Aye.
Trustee Pelosi.
Aye. Motion carried. Okay, moving on to item 5A. Is there a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Please call the roll.
Trustee Browdy.
Aye.
Trustee Conwell.
Aye.
Trustee Kerr.
Aye.
Trustee Oldgeen.
Aye.
Trustee Haug.
Aye.
Trustee Pelosi.
Aye. Motion carried. This meeting has ended at 7:12 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance and your commitment to St. Helena Unified. Enjoy your evening.
Good night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you very much.